So the Southern Voice is creating this series about writers from the South and writers of the South. And both are so important, right? They bring new ideas and sense of community. And I sort of based this series on a quote from Eudora Welty, Pulitzer Prize winner from Jackson, Mississippi. And she said,
Yes.
Southerners are talkers by nature, and even more so, they enjoy a good audience. And
Yes.
you are a perfect example of this. You are such a perfect.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Your writing style is so conversational. When I read your books, I am from the South. I'm from Georgia originally. I can picture everything that you write about, and it always triggers like a memory of someone I know that would fit that character, because the South is full of characters, right? We're storytellers.
Yes.
And it's so obvious there. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do try to incorporate. So when I first started writing, people would say, oh, you can't, I wasn't a true writer at all. I was just a storyteller. And so after a couple people in one day had said, you can write a book and you can tell a great story. I'm like, well, that's two different things. And so I found that I write the way I storytell. So when I was looking for a traditional publisher and an agent, they kept saying, you can't write the way you talk. And I'm like, yes, I can. And people like it. And I did. I stuck to my guns and I write exactly the way I would have a conversation, like you say. And when I write, I do try, like sitting here, I can describe what the river looks like that's outside my door, or the trees, because I want the reader to come along and to see what it is, and not only to hear and see, but to smell if they're somewhere, feel it, and the setting in my books, as well as the community, is more than just that. Like, I make them their own secondary character, and not just, the secondary human characters or dog or animal characters or whatever, but I want to make sure that they are like knocking on my door, coming right in. I'm going to get that Entenmann's cake right out of the freezer and serve it up and have a cup of coffee. And like, we're gathered around my table. That's exactly how I want my readers to feel. And I appreciate you saying that, because that's exactly what I've gone for. And that's an amazing quote to even put me in that category.
Well, I think that if you're going to be a Southern writer and you're going to be a storyteller, you have to come from a tradition of storytelling, and Southerners tell stories. That's how we pass along our histories, from our families. That's how we engage in our communities. And so when you take it and you turn it into a cozy mystery, and you add so much humor and life to your stories, I think that it is just the perfect avenue for a Southerner to walk down and enjoy just some escapism for a little while, because it's familiar, but yet it's still set apart a little bit. So you're like, oh, I can relax in this because I know this atmosphere.
Yes. Well, and it's funny that you would say that about Southerners and how we tell stories and they're generational. So I have 4 boys and they're all adults now. And I have told a story that happened to me with my dad or my mom, their grandparents, when I was a little girl. And it's funny because I guess I've told it in a way that made them feel like they were there. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I'm like, no, I was like your age when that happened. But when you tell those stories and like your family gets invested into them, then they tell them to their friends. And, I think that's funny because, like you said, they just kind of live on, those stories do. Mm-hmm. And then now that I'm writing them, a lot of my true life stories are in my books, and every single book, there's something that touches on, that gives the reader not only that mystery, like you said, of course, there's a dead body, but, it gives them a sense of the community, caring about the community, caring that the killer is, because we've added those Southern touches in the community that our Southern homes, and our communities give us that aren't all over, the world. In some places, I have readers from big cities that just cannot get over how our communities are. And they've said, I'm going to visit one of your towns. I'm like, oh, well, it's fiction. But, but if you come anywhere in the South and you stay a little bit, you're going to get that Southern feeling, and you're going to get that community that you are reading about, where you are escaping to. So I write mainly in Kentucky, and about Kentucky. And I have had, I can't even tell you, numerous accounts of readers who have actually come through Kentucky or come down to Kentucky and stayed in a community that was smaller, and, said, oh my gosh, I passed, for instance, Clay's Ferry, that is in one of my books, and the Kenny Lowry series. And somebody took a picture and said, I passed the exit of Clay's Ferry and I had to turn around and take a picture for you. Or of course, one of my series is also set in the Daniel Boone National, Forest. So I get a lot of people who have started traveling to the forest and taking pictures and realizing that all those little communities like Slade, down through there in the gorge, all those communities are really cute little communities that you find these places. So they escape, while they're reading, a great mystery to solve as well.
And you're contributing to the visitor, tourism bureau of the state of Kentucky at the same time.
I appreciate that.
You.
Just like small things, small towns. I was recently just at a funeral, no joke, about a couple of days ago. I'd gone to my small town to go to this funeral. And while I was there, our mayor, who's the ex-mayor, has now with the Transportation Bureau in Kentucky, and he's also on the Parks and Recs commission. And he said to me, Tonya, like at the funeral, just like it would be, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I saw you, because I was thinking about you, because I see him on Facebook signing bills. And I said, oh, I see you on Facebook at the National Parks Committee signing all the bills. And he said, and I think about you because we're putting so much ad dollars into our national park here in Kentucky. And I said, that's a good thing. I love that. I hope we can bring a lot more tourism to our state and our Southern communities.
That's awesome. That's a great connection.
Isn't that funny? Locally. It all happened at a funeral, where we're getting ready to take the potluck to the repast. So we could, I'm taking my best chicken pot pie.
I love that. I love your tagline on your website that says Southern hospitality with a smidgen of homicide. Yes. I think that is so quintessential Southern. I love it. Everyone knows what a dash, a dollop, and a smidgen is in the South.
Yes. So when I am on panels or at conferences, they always say, oh, tell us your tagline, and because they love it. And then I'll say it's a Southern hospitality with a smidgen of homicide. I said, you might get one or two murders in the book, but anything over that's a thriller, and I don't write thrillers. Yeah. So, so they crack up every time, because I'm like, some cozies probably do have 3 or more bodies, but mine definitely do not. Yes. We don't got time for all that.
I know. You got too many other things going on.
Yes. Too much gossiping to do.
That's right. That's right. So I think that your writing story is so interesting, because you are not the typical, you don't really fit the typical box that most people imagine for a writer. Most people think, oh, a writer, when they were a kid, they were a huge reader. They journaled, they, dreamed of writing novels, those types of things. That was not your story at all.
No, not at all. I actually wanted to be a veterinarian when I was a kid. And then I found out you had to put animals to sleep. And that was just like, well, I'm not going to be that kind of veterinarian. Yeah. So that just was off the table. But, I grew up in a small town at the time, maybe between 3,000 to 4,000 people. And, we are a rural community, and my family were farmers and tobacco growers. And at any given time, this was in the 80s, so any given time that it was tobacco season and we didn't go to school, we didn't show up for school, it was an excuse. It was an excused absent, because that's how our families lived, So I did not read books. And actually, if I had it, I could grab it. But in my report card, it says, my fourth grade report card. I have it, and it says if Tonya would have just finished or done one of the required 4 book reports, she would have done well in English. And I didn't turn in any of them. And I'm like, Mom, because my mom stayed at home and my dad worked. And I'm like, where were you? And she hates when I pull that out on stage and I'm somewhere, because I carry it with me everywhere. Because it's just wasn't something I was interested in. And of course I had, I remember one book signing I went to because I loved Shirley Temple, and she was going to the Walden's bookstore in Lexington and we're signing her book, Shirley Temple Black. And I remember my mom taking me, and we had bought the book, and I didn't even read the book, but I just loved her so much. So I know I wanted to. So it was the only book signing I had ever gone to. And then years later, I was a teacher and I was divorced, and I'm a very upbeat, happy person by nature. And when I got divorced, you have kids, and my son would go to his dad's every other weekend. And I found myself in this deep, dark hole, and I would get up and I would go to church on Sundays, and then I'd come back and get in my bed. And it was just something I'm like, I wasn't used to that. And I mean, it was so bad that my parents, who lived 2 hours away, would drive up and check on me. And so I was in school at the time, going back again to become a child therapist. And the girls in the university were obviously younger than me. I'd already grown, I was in my mid-30s, and they got their bachelor's and then went right in to get their master's. And one of them said, "We have a book club. Why don't you come to our book club?" And I said, "Oh, no." I don't even have a library card. I don't even go to, any bookstores. And so they said, "Oh, well, we have chocolate and wine." And I said, "What time did you say that book club was?"
Sign me up.
Sign me up. So not only did I get into this book club, but I had instant friends. And it was great. I loved it. I loved being in a sorority when I was at the University of Kentucky, and I loved being around people. And they would host the book club on the weekend that my son was gone. So it gave me something to do. And so I really liked that, but I did not pick up the books. So I did go to Walden's. I was there for the community, just to get out of my house, and I did go to Walden's. I don't even have Walden's anymore.
They have, no, I remember Walden's too.
Yes. So I went to Walden's and picked up the book of the month. And that Sunday I picked it up after church and thought, oh, maybe I'll read it. And it was Chick Lit. It was when Chick Lit was popular at the time. And so about 6 hours later, there was a knock at the door, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had escaped into this Chick Lit book and not realized that 6 hours had passed and my son was home. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I could not wait for him to go to bed so I could finish the book. But anyways, that started my love of reading. And I stuck with that many years later with that group of ladies, and married again and have 4 boys. And then I was hosting book club. And like any book club, when you're, our book club, when you host it, you get to pick the book for the next read. And like any book lover, you don't walk away from a bookstore with one book. So I had a stack of books, and my husband, an investment. And, we're trying to have a family of 6, feed 4 little boys. And my husband looks at the stack and he said, "How much did you pay for books?" And I said, "Well, I just don't know which one I'm going to pick." And so he picked it up and he opened it and he read a little bit of it. He said, "You can tell a story better than this is written." And I said, "Oh, you're just my husband, right?" And my biggest cheerleader. And so then that night we were at book club and I was telling the story and they were laughing, and they said, "Oh my gosh, Tonya, you could write a book." And I said, "Oh yeah, okay." But, that stuck in my head. And I'm in my mid-30s, and, I've already had 2 careers. I was a teacher before, now I'm a therapist. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, there is no way I could, because I've not read all the greats, I have not read all the wonderful stories that people like, "Oh, that's such a great story. We read that when we were younger." I didn't do any of those things. And so I was like, oh, I'm just this little girl from the small Kentucky town. And, but I have big dreams. And once I set my mind to something, I do it. And so that night I woke my husband up at midnight when they left. And I always like to say it's a little liquid courage probably that was helping me. But I was like, do you really think that I could help one reader escape just like the one book did for me? When I discovered reading, and just one person. And I knew nothing about book writing. I knew nothing about publishing. I didn't know you had to have an agent at the time. I didn't know anything about publishers. I didn't know that you had to write a book and then ship it off in an envelope because the internet wasn't a place where you could query people. I was so green that, I think ignorance helped me out, because the next day, two of my kids were in Pee Wee football and you couldn't leave in case they got hurt.
Yep.
So I went to the store and got me a notebook and a mechanical pencil. And I sat down underneath the oak tree and started writing my first book. And I just never looked back. And I think ignorance of just, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm just, how we Southern girls, we dig in. Oh yeah, I'm going to do this,
That gumption.
Yeah. And I did it. And, 100 and something books later, and 10 years later, here we are, and never have looked back.
I think that's such a positive message too for people who claim they may not be readers, because, it's not about, not being a reader. It's about finding the right book that you connect with
right
at the time. And at the time you need to connect to a book.
Yes.
And I think that's important. And that obviously has served you well.
Yes. Well, and I tell people that pick up my books, like, they're like, oh, what do I like? If I'm at an event and they're like, oh, what do you write? And I'm like, cozy mystery. And they're like, oh, we like thrillers, or we like romance. And I'm like, well, I'm the good old Mark Twain saying about some people like fine wine, but everybody needs water. I always say I'm the water. After you've had that good read, I'm the one to help cleanse that palate. And thank God everybody needs water.
That's right.
So I always, tell them that I'm not going to be somebody they're going to walk away and say, oh my goodness. Now that was just the best murder mystery, but you are going to walk away remembering the characters and the town and be entertained and escape. It's, from whatever you're doing. And when I've got my very first reader email, it's from a reader that told me that my book helped her escape while her mom was going through open heart surgery. And that I had fulfilled I believe my purpose. And so I always, even when I write, like today, I finished a book this morning before we got on here. And I always say, okay, when this book publishes, not anytime soon, but, please let it find the right reader that needs this at the right time. Because I always still keep that reader foremost in my head, because I think it's so important to remember my purpose.
And I think your reader, you have a huge following, large readership. And that's because I feel like readers say, you know what, she's like me. I can connect to her. I can connect to her stories. I can connect to her Facebook lives. I can, everyone needs a Rowena the cat in their life.
Yes, I don't know where she's at yet. She might sneak in here. But it's so funny. I'm a member of Weight Watchers. I've been a member of Weight Watchers for 14 years before I was even a writer. And I still go every week, but you know why I go? Because it's a community. Like I'm just a lifetime member. I don't need to lose the weight or anything like that. So I probably could lose, but anyways, I go because every week it gets me out of the house of the community. And a couple of weeks ago, I was sitting in the meeting and this lady came in and she said, oh, you look familiar. Do I know you? And I'm like, oh, I don't think so. And I'm just, and I've got on sweatpants, I got my hair pulled up and my dilly wop. And she's like, do you write books? And I'm like, oh. And then the leader goes, oh, her name's Tonya. She writes cozy mystery. She's like, oh my gosh, I've read all your books and you're a Weight Watchers. And I'm like, yes, because I eat just as much as everybody else. I still have all the struggles. And so she goes, I love you even more now because I feel like you're just a normal everyday girl. And I go, I sure am. And honestly, when I started writing, I wanted to connect because actually I kind of started stalking that author that I discovered,
Mhm.
and we became friends. And I had gone to one of her events, and well, actually, she said she was coming to Kentucky and said, "Hey, I need a place to stay." And I'm like, "How do you know I'm not going to kill you?" And so she was like, "I'll take my chances." And so she came all the way from California, and she was opening the Kentucky Book Festival. And she said, "Can you help me put together an event? I want to do 10 of my closest readers that are coming, and I want to rent Serafina's, which is a really cute little Italian restaurant in Frankfort, Kentucky, our capital." And she goes, "And I'm going to send you boxes of things, and you make me goodie bags, and we'll spend the night and we'll do some girl time." And I'm like, "Okay, this is like her books." And I watched her at that event. I put the event together. She stayed with me. And we had a lovely time and found out we were more alike than we knew we were. And we're the same age. We both have 4 boys. We were both in the same sorority growing up. I mean, when we were in college. But I watched her, and she interacted with every reader personally. And it didn't matter. She would come back to me, and I just felt like I mattered every time she talked to me. And I was just like, "Oh gosh, she makes you feel like you're mattered, like you're matter to her." And I knew from the beginning that's exactly how I wanted each reader to feel. And so that's exactly how I've based my community on that interaction with her as well. So, and I, again, always, before I go on a live, I always say, just let me touch somebody today or tell a funny story that might help somebody escape or connect with them in a way that I can. And that's something I do not take for granted at all, is my community. Very important to me.
And your community appreciates you. It's so
Aw.
evident in the interactions, you know, in your book clubs, on your Instagram, your Facebook lives. It's very obvious. You'll find those authors that you feel are not cold but more distant. They write their books, and they want to send them out into the world. And yes, there are people who read them, but they may or may not want to engage.
Yeah.
It seems like engaging with readers is not even an issue with you.
No.
It's your goal. It's your point. Like, you're not writing these books just for yourself. You're writing them to send them out and for them to find homes with your readers.
And it also goes along with our Southernisms, right? I mean, we're born Southern, and we welcomed everybody. We didn't care if they called before they came. They just showed up. That made for the best visits, right? And so I believe that I'm the extrovert author, which is, I think, sometimes unusual. Not really sure about introverts too much, but I know that some people, it's hard for them to interact with people. But again, when I focus on that one person that I'm talking to, it's just like I invite them into my home and I welcome with open arms. And, again, grabbing that cake out of the freezer to serve to them, and we have the best time. And it's just like, just being kind and being nice doesn't cost a thing.
Yep.
And I'm all about that. I'm all about that.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
When you start writing, what is your writing process? When you decide to start a new series, where do you get your ideas? Are they just things that you pick up in your everyday life? Do you see a show or a movie and say, that would make a great cozy mystery story? And then how do you set out to put your words into print?
Okay. So when I'm doing, so if you're starting a series and I'm writing cozy mystery, I always try to figure out a different occupation, because obviously in cozy mysteries, we have the bakers, the librarians, those kind of things. So I've had a mail carrier. I've had, I have had a baker, and I've had a sheriff, and I've had a journalist, and then I've had a campground owner, right? And so I always start off with, what can they do that's really not been done before? You think about those things. And so when I did the mail carrier series, I thought, golly, you can learn a lot about people from their mail. You really can. And so I'm really close with my mailman, or mail person. I'm really close with the people that work at the post office. And I mean, they see me get out of the car. I mean, my post office is as big as a post stamp.
Yeah.
And so they see me get out of my car, and they've already gotten my mail out of my P.O. box. Like, they're waiting for me. And, you know, I mean, so much so that they know that my son is collecting these little Blanton, is it Blanton's whiskey or bourbon local that has the little horse on it, and it has like a little letter, and it spells out Blanton's. And so they're really hard to get the whole thing. And I had said to the guy that works in my post office, I said, "Oh, my son, I just is over at the liquor store trying to find the Blanton's O, the letter O for Blanton's." And he's like, "Oh, I think I have an extra one of those at home." So no joke, the next day I go to the post office, and he didn't give me the bottle of bourbon. He just gave me the little cork that has the brass horse on it with the O on it. And my son was like, "Oh my gosh, thanks." And so, you know, it's just, I'm trying. And so I got close with them and talked about mail and, you know, things that they've seen. And I thought that would be a really fun, you know, cozy mystery sleuth. So then
see everybody in the community.
Oh, everybody, they hear
office.
things, and people are over there like putting their stamps on while they're talking to other people, and, you know, all these things, right? And then you notice when people don't pick up their mail, or, you know, are they alive? Are they dead? You know, things like that. And so I always try to pick out that sleuth. Like, what is it about their occupation that's going to kind of stand out from the rest? And then I buy a cheap old Dollar Tree, which no longer can be called the Dollar Tree, address book, those spiral bound black address books. And I start thinking of names of the characters and what would be in the town. And so, like, say if the character is Tonya, then I will, under the T, write Tonya, and then all her characteristics and maybe what she owns in the town. Maybe she owns the, you know, I don't know, the local diner or something. And so I start creating that list, and then it kind of, the series kind of starts coming to me. I'm like, oh, who's going to be the side sleuths, and what, I always make the side sleuth the quirky characters, because you really want the sleuth to have, you know, be strong and have, you know, the know-how to solve the crimes and to grow with the series. So then for instance, was talking, I was at I write this campground series, and a lot of campgrounds ask me to come a lot. And I have a camper, and that's where I generally write every day, is in my camper on my property. And so they invite me to come do book signings. So I was just at a book signing last week at a campground. And when they asked, they're like, "Oh, we want you to come for the day." I'm like, "I won't come for the day. I'll come for the week." So, I mean, we haul up, we grab the cat, we go in the camper, and we go to these campgrounds, and I can work from the campground. And so this guy came in to the book signing, and we were in the pavilion on this campground, and he had this big old hat on and cowboy boots and big buckle. And he said, "What's going on here?" And I said, "Oh, we're having a book signing." And he's like, "Oh, well, you know, tell me about the book. Are you the author?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, tell me about your books." And so I was telling him about him, and I said, "So are you visiting?" Because it was down in Kentucky. And I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, we went to Keeneland." And I said, "Oh, good." You know, because horse racing's on right now. It's in season for the next few weekends. And I said, and he said, "You know, I go, "Well, did you win?" And he said, "Well, I was winning to the last race." He goes, "And then I bet it all on a horse with 12-1 odds." And he said, and the horse got disqualified because the jockey, they were so close in the race that the jockey was whipping the horse. And if you know anything about horse racing, he probably had his elbow out too much. If they're that tight, they need to just use their wrist. And he hit the horse with his whip next to him. And so that disqualified him. And he said, "So I lost all my money." And I went, "Oh my goodness." And he looked at me funny. He goes, "What?" And I said, "Oh, did you see that look on my face?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Because literally you just gave me an idea. Not only do we have a dead jockey, But you've got an owner that's really upset. 12, the odds are 12-1, and he clearly won, but not doing that. Then you have a trainer who's really, really upset. And now I have a gentleman here out of state that's just angry at the world because he spent all his money on this one horse to win. So, and he looked at me and goes, oh my gosh, that scares me. Do I need to watch out my camper windows tonight? And so he was from Texas, and no sooner did he leave, maybe 10 minutes after, up comes his wife to buy some books, and just so excited about it. And so, those where I get my stories, I get my stories from listening to stuff like that. And something that happened with my husband, we walk and we talk, and he had said something. And I'm like, you just gave me a whole entire cozy mystery plot. So, and I wrote it down because I do believe that and I said it through my phone when we were walking, because I didn't want to, it's so good. I can't remember it now, but I do believe that when ideas come to you or come to me, like I immediately talk in my phone or try to scribble them down, because if I don't, I'm like, okay, it's off. And now it's going to go to another author, another writer, and they're going to write it. So I try to write down the good ones, but that's where the ideas come from. And then I am a loose plotter. I always, you write cozy or mysteries backwards. You have your death, your murder. And so I always know who's murdered, why, and 3 or 4 suspects and a killer and all their motives. And then that's how I start, writing. And I don't know how long a series is going to be unless it, progresses and is wanted by the readers and, has a demand. Yes. So the length of the series, I don't know, but generally everybody in the town. Yeah.
That's good, because Southerners are nosy. We want to know what's going on in the personal lives of everybody in our town.
Yes. And I love it. One of my ladies in one of my books, in the Laundry Club ladies in the camper series, she's like, well, we don't call it a gossip. We just say we're praying for people. You know how we do.
I love that. I love that.
Thank you.
So when you start creating sort of your communities and your books and your settings, your books, you tend to focus on Kentucky because that's where you're from. Do you have to think like, when I'm doing this, I want Southern sounding names for my characters, or did things like that just naturally flow because that's intrinsically who you are because of where you're from?
Right. So I knew so I have some books that are still set in Kentucky, but they really didn't have that Southern flair. So once I saw the Southern books really taken off, I'm like, that is my niche. That's what my readers love, is that Southern part. But I've always had the character name Southern because that's where I grew up. Like from home, my name is Tonya K. I don't go by Tonya. My cousins all go by 2 names. My friends all go by 2 names. And so, that's just something that's ingrained in me. So that's just part of the culture that I write. So I did make sure that I incorporated that into the books. Another thing is, we have such unusual names in the South.
Yep.
And I had written a series that was picked up. I had self-published it, and then it was picked up by HarperCollins called Southern Ghostly Mystery Series. And she is Undertaker. And so I love Emily.
Favorite book you've ever written. My personal favorite.
Thank you. It was a crazy how that book, how that series got picked up, but that's a whole nother story. But so in that series, you meet the first death, the older lady, she is really patterned after an old neighbor of mine that she would toddle across the street with her little cocktail. And, she was like probably 90 then. And every Sunday night I'd go over to her place and we would watch Murder, She Wrote. And, she was so cute and Southern, and she had manners, but she loved her bourbon with her big ice cube at night. And we just had the best time. But her name was Ruthie. And so, as a matter of fact, she willed me a lot of her furniture. She had passed. I'd gotten so close to her and her family. So she was with that, but then what happened was that we also, when I was in high school, we had a guy from our hometown named Eggs Wilhoit, and he was a lovely man. But he was a junker and he went slow. Like, I'm talking, if you went to school and you were late, you could say, I was behind Eggs Wilhoit on the way here, and you'd be excused. That was how slow it was. And so then we also had another 80-year-old woman moonshiner named Chicken. And she would sell moonshine out of the back of her station wagon down by the river. And there we'd go in the car, me, mama, daddy, and my sister going down there to get the moonshine. And so, these are fond memories, that I have of growing up. And so I put their names in books, not their full name, but just their first name. And I'll never forget, the editor of that series lives in New York, and she called me and she said, I have got to ask you about these names. And I said, oh yeah, they're real people. And she's like, I live amongst 8 million people and I do not know anyone by the name of Eggs. And I just laughed and I said, well, that's the truth. And she goes, please don't tell me that the chicken and the egg knew each other. I said, oh, they totally knew each other. And so, it just makes the names, because you do hear all those names in the South, and we still name our children those old time names. And so I'm so close to Appalachia that we have a lot of strange names as well that I love to use.
Yeah.
They're just timeless names that put you into, when you read those names, oh, I'm going to be in a Southern story here.
Yep. It sets the stage. It really does.
Yeah, it does.
So mentioning the ghostly Southern mystery. So this is my personal favorite Tonya Kappes book, and it is a ghostly undertaking. And it is hysterical. This is a book that I can read and laugh out loud because it's the main character. She is an undertaker. Her family owns the funeral home in this town. And if you have any experience in a small Southern town, death is such a part of life and community. From, the visitation and the wake and taking food to the families and feeding the family after the service and the graveside, and everyone shows up, and
you got to have the best flowers at the funeral.
And
that's important.
It is. And everyone sort of it's another point in time to gather. You see people that you haven't seen in years that show up. You have those who come to pay respects, and then you have those who come to see who else showed up and why they may be there.
Yes.
And that is such a part of this book. And it reminds me of my, hometown.
Yeah.
And I connect to this book, but it is hilarious, just the way the story is written and the characters. And so I love the fact that you take simple everyday events that happen that are normal in a Southern town. They're not normal elsewhere, because I've lived all over the country and in Europe. And trust me, when you're from the South, you realize the way we do things, it is different, but it's so comforting to pick up a book and say, you know what? I have been at a viewing just like what happened in Tonya's book.
Yes. So interestingly enough, the funeral that I was just talking about earlier that I attended this week was actually after the funeral home, the owner of the funeral home had passed, and his daughter is my friend, and her name's Kelly Lynn. And so 2 names. And so when we were younger, her parents were in the funeral home, and they had the telephone in their house that we could not touch. But if it was after hours, they were the only ambulance service in our county. So if I spent the night with her and the phone rang in the middle of the night, we're like, oh, something happened. Somebody died, and then we'd go to the funeral home because they were the only morgue in our small town. So we played in the funeral home. And we did all the things in the funeral home. And so just this week, her father passed away, who is still the owner of the funeral home. Her mom also runs it. So, but I have seen so many things. So when I sat out to write this book, naturally, I was like, this is from my childhood. And another story in that book was when Ruthie, the ghost, it's a ghost, when she says, wow, I didn't like her when I was living, much less when I'm dead. Why'd she come see me at the funeral home? Well, that happened. I was sitting in the front pew of a funeral one time, and again, I was a teenager, and it tickled me. It tickled my funny. I just couldn't stop laughing. But sure enough, somebody next to me said, I don't know why on earth she showed up here. He didn't like her when he was living, much less when he's dead. And I thought, I busted out laughing, and I got to cackling. And of course, then they started telling me more stories and nudging me, getting me to laugh even more. And my parents were looking at me and, giving me the side eye. And I'm like, I can't stop laughing because it was so funny. And then one time, a fly and at that same funeral, a fly had come in and landed on the deceased, and the deceased she was a widow, and she said that the lady next to me, who I won't name, she said, yep, that's him. He's already pooping on her. So, I was just cackling. And, it's just those things that stick with you that people could say under their breath, but they don't want everybody to know it. And they certainly probably didn't know I was going to put it in a book. I didn't know I was going to put it in a book until I'm writing it. And these things come back to me and they just laugh. And when people in my hometown read my books, they're like, oh, I totally remember this person, or no, that person, or that's my aunt, or in my Kenny Lowry series, it's also a ghost kind of series, and she's the sheriff of the small town of Cottonwood. And if you were to take the map in the small town in my series and stick it on top of my hometown, it's the exact same layout, the same streets, everything. That we had a place called Free Row, which was where people lived with commodity cheese, and it's still called Free Row, but my aunt and uncle live on it now. When I was growing up, it was called Free Row. The town branch was a little branch that went through. Oh, he lives down yonder on the town branch. And so, I know what that is, but I had to tell people, oh, it's on Oak Street, if you were coming to town. So, it's just those things, those little details in the books that make them a good escape. I hope, for people, because you still get all that in the South.
You do. So, as a cozy mystery writer, I have to ask this question. What is the strangest research you have ever done for one of your books?
Oh, the strangest. Gosh. I don't know. I've done a lot of research. Okay. So I wanted to know about forest therapy, and they are a whole strange bunch on their own. Great people. So I did this forest thing. It's like a real thing, like forest bathing and all this stuff. And I was like, what kind of cuckoo place have I come to? And so that was a little odd, like touching trees and kind of being a tree hugger. And I'm like, yeah, well, we'd be in a deer stand right now if you were in Kentucky, or I'd be looking at that turkey over there going, and so, kind of strange like that. And I belong to like a lot of different places. Like, I'm going to make a walking stick on Saturday so I can learn how to whittle it and to actually emboss it. So those kind of things. I've taken baking classes. I've taken baking decoration classes, hand pie classes. I have done any kind of things that are in my books. I did police academy, a local police academy. That was a lot of fun. We all had shirts. We had a big cake at the end. And I got a little piece of paper. I was so proud of it. We've done all the things. I've always tried to do something with each book, try to figure out something that I did the reenactments in some of the books, and went to an actual reenactment from the same book. It was Camp Wildcat, which is still down at the Daniel Boone
Mhm.
National Forest. So I went to that reenactment and watched that. So, and even though I didn't really put the reenactment in, I mean, it's in the book, but it's not like it wasn't played out in the book like they did.
Mhm.
But it is in there, and trying to educate, like, oh, they still have these things, come look at it. The distilleries, I've done all that. I recently, there's a process now, and we take our bourbon pretty serious in
Mhm.
Kentucky and how you make it. And now there is a process that literally you can make bourbon in like 10 hours. And so that just went into a book, because that could hurt the industry. So I could see a lot of people wanting to get killed, killing somebody for that. And
Yeah.
there's an actual distillery in Cincinnati that opened up doing that.
Okay.
And I went and toured and learned about that. And at the time, my husband was an electrician.
Mhm.
He's retired now, and he works with me, but he was on the job as the electrician. And so it's very interesting to hear the process and what he had to do electrically to get it done. And so just super, super interesting. Also, another thing was Bitcoin, super popular when
Mhm.
it was popular.
Yeah.
And there are these huge substations, and you wouldn't know what they were
Mhm.
if you didn't know what they were. Because I didn't know what they were until, again, I was introduced, taken, said, oh, do you want to see? And I'm like, sure. So that's these big boxes. And so this was near a neighborhood here in Kentucky, and they were complaining about these big boxes next to this power station,
Mhm.
and because it was humming. And so, but when he opened it up to show me, it's just all computers in there, and it's all Bitcoin. And it's these Bitcoin stations that are manned from different cities around the world. And
Mhm.
they have these stations all over. And it's the strangest thing. Like, it's not manned by people,
Uh-huh.
but it's just a wall in these, like, you know train track, those big train, or even those big containers on ships,
Uh-huh.
like ship containers,
Mhm.
that's just filled with these computers that are manned, but they need them to be in various places around the United
That is
States.
interesting.
It's crazy. And also, as a therapist, I went to do therapy at a lot of safe houses.
Mhm.
And so you would not believe where some of these safe houses are. They're in
Mhm.
the nicest neighborhoods.
Mhm.
They are in the worst neighborhoods. They're so being able to use those kind of things just in my daily life,
Mhm.
and experience those kind of things have helped. But I always try to, like, also I write a coffee cozy mystery that's
Mhm.
I love. And I went to a roastery here and took roastery classes. And yeah, I did a lot of that. A lot of that was fun. And a lot of it I'm like, oh, I'm just going to take a roastery class and get pictures, for my readers. But
Yeah.
it turns out, I learned so much.
Mhm.
And I forgot about that. That was a lot of fun too. But and I'm not a huge traveler except in
Mhm.
our camper. So I don't really go to a lot, really lavish places
Yeah.
to take that in. So I have no plans currently to leave my books out of Kentucky. So
That's good. Well, today you have a new book released.
do.
Hammocks, Handguns, and Hearsay, which is part of the Campers and
Yes.
Criminals Cozy Mystery Series. And this series, it unfolds like it's something on the 6 o'clock news in a Southern town. It really is. Tell
Yeah.
us the background for this series and where
Okay.
it's going.
All right. So I grew up camping with my parents. We had a little yellow Winnebago, like you would see on the first book, which I have that right here. And
Mhm.
oh, and here's another one.
Mhm.
And so when to tell the truth, I had started plotting a series that was called The Laundry Club Ladies.
Mhm.
And in small towns, we love our laundromats. Oh my gosh, we love them. And in my town now, we have a laundromat that is so nice. I mean, it has a little restaurant. It's got like a little soda fountain machine. It's got these little couches. It's got a place to play games. I mean, it's so comforting. I'm like, this is nicer than my house. And so you can watch TV. It's got it all. And so I thought, how fun would it be to like have a mystery book club that meets here while they're doing laundry.
Mm-hmm.
So my cover artist, she does, well, she I don't know how often she does them now, but she does what's called pre-made cover sales.
Okay.
And so she'll like make like 200 covers, and she'll have a like kind of like a not an auction but a sale, and she puts them up on her website, and she opens the website and they go in seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So when she put up, she's like, oh, this is a little example of what's coming up next. And so she put up 3 little campers, and I'm like, oh, those are my covers. I need to have a campground. I know all about camping. I have a camper. We camp. I raised 4 boys. We all camped. I can write about a campground. How fun. And you can find dead bodies. Oh my gosh. What about if it was in the Daniel Boone National Forest? What if it was this? How many bodies could you find? Oh, how many times do we hear on the news locally? Oh, there was a death. Somebody fell off the edge. I'm like, oh, did they fall or were they pushed? You know, I mean, you just think about all these things, right? And I'm like, oh, this will be great. So then it became campers and criminals, cozy mystery. So she had said, oh, everybody wants those covers. And I'm like, well, they're my covers. And she's like, well, I can't sell them to you because they're in the pre-made sale. And I'm like, I want those covers. But I was smart enough to be forward thinking that if I got on her website and had filled out like all my credit card information and all that stuff first, and be on there and immediately get them. And lo and behold, I got them. And I held on to them for about a year.
Uh-huh.
And so in 2018 was when the first book came out. And I thought, now the sleuth can't be super likable if she's traveling. How's this going to happen? Oh, at the time that whole Bernie Madoff thing was going on, I'm like, well, what about his wife? What happened to his wife? You know? And I'm like, she could kind of be like a Bernie Madoff wife, you know, broken and left with everything. And not only when she gets to this campground that's in her name, but the people in the town were also scammed by him, you know, and they're not going to help her. They're not going to like her. And then also at the time I was purchasing property in the middle of a mountain here in Kentucky, and it was a big 10,000 square foot dome house that in true life $64 million Powerball winners lived in.
Oh, wow.
And there's a pond over here, and it has this rickety old, you know, little dock, you know. And so I mean, these people have their own, they're both dead, you know, they died. It was called, you know, the grim side of lottery. And she passed in the house over a drug overdose, and her son, and there was a lot of heartache where I live. And so we tore down that house, needless to say, and built a tiny 2,000 square foot house. But I was looking at that pond, and I'm like, oh, you know, what if somebody floated up? Because there's a lot of history in this property. As a matter of fact, you can look it up. The grim side of winning the jackpot on the New York Times site. There's a big New York Times article on it. And so, but people will say, "Oh, you're the new people that bought the mansion on the hill." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's gone." So if you come now, it's just a little shack. But anyways, but people around here know about this people, and so. You know, there's all those what ifs, you know, what if there's a lake and what if he turns up dead? What if he turns up dead while she's on that dock and it falls, just all those things started playing in my head and how funny it would be. Because I just thought it'd be funny. And there is a campground manager that's broken down, that in a broken down camper that smokes and is brash and Southern as you can be, well, hillbilly really as you can be, not just Southern, but true hillbilly, and tells you how it is. Then I didn't realize when I was writing Dottie Swagger as a secondary character that she's the one everybody loves the most, because of who she is. But so the series, progressed in my head, and then I'm like, oh, well, this is 3 books. It's cute. It'll be fine. But then Schitt's Creek happened. And I started getting people saying, oh my gosh, the camper series is just like Schitt's Creek in a camper series, in a campground. And then it got caught on more and more to camping grounds, and people started camping. And then COVID happened, and then people really started camping. And then young ladies that were reading more romance had moved in back home with their parents. Their mothers were reading my books. They started swapping books. So I started getting younger audiences. The series has just kind of taken on a life of its own, but it's book 31 now. And I still love it. It's still, and I can still do fresh content. It's not the same old. And each character has grown through the series. And so I don't have any plans right now currently to drop it or to end the series. It's really hard to juggle the 5 series that I'm writing. And so instead of putting out a lot of books in that series every year, you might just start getting like 2 instead of like 5.
Which is another aspect where you're different from traditional published authors, because most authors maybe put out 1 to 3 books in a year, whereas you put out quite a few more than that. Now, is that based on the fact that your word count is a smaller or shorter word count, or because you don't have the red tape of traditional publishing since you publish your books on Amazon? What do you think about those things?
So we'll go back to the Ghostly Southern Mystery Series. So those books were published when HarperCollins had called and said, hey, we would love to pick up your series. And that was one of the very first self-published series that they had picked up. So they really didn't know a whole lot about self-publishing at that time. And so my word count was 50,000 words. And they're like, well, normally we do like 80 for a cozy mystery. And they said, but we'll take 50. We'll take 50. And I'm like, okay, great. And so then I thought, oh my gosh, that's doable, and I write every day. So I'm empty nest. My boys are all, my youngest just turned 24 yesterday. My oldest is 30, and then I have twins that'll be 26. So, we're empty nest, and my husband's retired from his career job and now works for me. So we have all day long, I visit with my friends, but every morning I get up and I write, and I can write anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 words a day. And they might not be great words. They're not great words, but they're at least words I can edit, right? So I go straight through, and I can finish a first draft in about 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so if you think about it, if you write, even 2,000 words a day, you're going to have a finished novel at 50,000 words. Cause I'm like, if it's good enough for HarperCollins, it's sure that good enough for me.
Yep.
So I was also approached by Random House to write the Southern Bakery series. And that's under Mamie Bell. That's a pen name. And so they wanted 80,000 words. And I'm like, 80,000 words is a lot of fluff for cozy mystery. And so we got to 80,000 words, but then I never took another contact from them again, because it just, again, the traditional tape, that takes, I write it, and by the time it comes out, I've forgotten about it. And because it takes them, a good 18 months. So I have an actual editing service that I use. I have 4 editors on each book, 3 rounds, Plus, I have an ARC team of 100 that'll read it and catch anything. We don't catch all the things, obviously. And then I have an influencer group now for social media, TikTok and Instagram, that also will send before the book releases any sort of mistakes or anything like that. So we have a good set of like 200 eyes on the books before they release, but with everything, there's always some errors, and that's okay. Because I'm, again, just blessed to be able to do this. And my main purpose is to help people escape. So I've been fortunate enough that, I've stuck with that and it's served me well. But my books are, most cozies that are self-published are anywhere between 50 and 60,000 words, I think, or my friends that write cozy mystery are around that length. And, we like having control of when we can release our books and when we don't. So, and then I stay about 3 books ahead. So it looks like I am publishing every month. But I'm at a place to where I bank books and I'm, being able to reach all those readers with the various series. So, and I have to write in the various series to cleanse my mind.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's up next in the world of Tonya Kappes writing?
And writing wise or just life? So writing wise, the next book is in the Killer Coffee series. And that's Cappuccino Criminal. And I have a couple of books coming up there. I also started a spinoff series of the Camper and Criminal Cozy Mystery series called the Holiday Cozy Mystery series. That came out of love for, I have a Patreon group. And so to give them extra, I just was like, oh, let's take Violet Reinhammer from the Camper and Criminals, because she was wearing me out. She's like, I need my own book. And I'm like, no. Or she wanted to go above May and, the Real Sleuth in the Camper series. I'm like, you cannot do that either. And so she was larger than life for that series. And she wore me out in the middle of the night, waking me up. And so finally I said, okay, I'm going to give you your own series and it's going to be Patreon, and at the time, that's when Kindlevella or Amazon was thinking about doing Kindlevella, and they contacted me and asked if I would be interested in doing this beta program. And I was already writing for my Patreon. And so, I kind of do the Kindlevella and the Patreon at the same time now, because I went into their program for a while with 2 books and it served me well. And so, a little selfishly, I wrote those books using Violet, and they're all set around the holidays because I love reading holiday cozy mysteries. So I'm like, why not write myself one? So they get all of those first. So like right now they're reading 4th of July Felony, which will be out, in July. So they're reading those, and I write those, like, say for instance, like right now I would just write a 600 words and give it to them. Like, it's not edited. It's off the cuff. So whatever they're getting is just right out of my head. But then they will get the edited version as well at the end, which generally doesn't turn out quite as well. It doesn't turn out the way it was when they first read it. I've since changed and things have changed in my head. But so I'm staying up to date with that series. So I'm writing in that series currently, and just trying to keep up with my community, gearing up for my mystery event that I do every October with my readers. We rent a mystery train every year, and that's a lot of fun. Initially it started out 10 years ago. It's about 10 years. Maybe 9 because COVID kind of messed us up, but and they're like, oh, where are you going to come here? When are you going to come here? And I'm like, well, I can't be in all the places at once. And again, my kids were small then. So I said, well, I'll just start hosting my own event, different places in the United States. And the first year I rented a train with a mystery troupe and dinner and had 100 readers, and I limited it to 100. And I didn't take any books. I brought them all, gifts and like actual gift boxes with like masks and all this stuff that was Kentucky made. And it had engraved on it, 2 names on a mystery train. And, they're like, where's the books? And I'm like, oh, I didn't bring any books. They go, oh, we're not buying books. There's not a book sign. I went, no, I just want to hang out with you guys. Just be Tonya, a reader, hanging out with her reader friends that she finally met off of Facebook.
Mhm.
And so then the next year, and they're like, you better bring books. And so it kind of turned into a thing that went from just a 3-hour dinner train to now a full-blown weekend. And we've been to Niagara Falls. We've been, to St. Louis. We've been all over. This year it is in Kentucky. So we are doing the Kentucky dinner train here that is also owned by friends of ours from my small town, and a bourbon tour, and my old Kentucky home, and we're having dinner there. And it's just a lot of fun, so that's coming up. So I'm planning for that.
Mhm.
And that takes a little bit of planning and
Sure.
I don't mind that. So there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of camping trips this summer, a lot of campground signings,
Mhm.
just a lot of fun things like that. So
Good deal. You stay super busy.
yeah, well, it was interesting, when you have kids and you're gone the go with them, all the time. And then when they leave, you're like, okay, now what? Because the friends that you met through them, their parents, they're on the go with their children now. Now their children are gone. So we're all kind of like, oh,
What next?
so we just keep ourselves busy. Yeah. Yeah. And I
Awesome.
belong to a local hiking group and
Mhm.
have a lot of small group of friends that I like to, enjoy as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, so we are going to finish up with giving our readers a little insight. We're going to play our quick round of 20 questions. It's going to be fun,
Yes.
nothing serious, just sort of
Right.
a way for our readers to get to know you. I like to compare this to think about when you were a teenager and you would read like teen magazines and they would do like
Oh,
a
yeah.
profile on, I don't know, Rob Lowe or someone. And
He was on
at
my
the end of
wall.
it, and at
He
the
was
end of
on
it,
my
you're like,
wall.
his favorite food was this. Oh, it's my favorite food. I love
Yeah,
those. And so
that's
I was
awesome.
like, you know what? This is how, people want to know, like, who are they? Yes, this is how they write in their stories, but let's find out the interesting tidbits, right?
Sure.
So, okay, you ready? Here we
Yeah.
go. What is your all-time favorite band?
Oh gosh, my all-time favorite band would have to be YouTube. Or not YouTube, U2. I like YouTube. YouTube.
YouTube.
Yeah. So
Wow,
I
that's
saw
good.
them years ago at a Christian festival when I was in
Uh-huh.
high school before they were U2.
Yeah,
They were a Christian rock group.
that's
So,
crazy.
mhm.
What is your all-time favorite book?
Oh gosh. It would have to be the Little House on the Prairie series.
Okay, Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind or Weezer Boudreaux from Steel Magnolias?
I'd have to go with Weezer.
With
Weezer, hit Weezer.
I would too. Matlock or Murder, She Wrote?
Matlock.
Mhm. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Yes, same here. Nectar of the Gods.
Yes. Yeah.
Mountains or beach?
Mountains.
Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys?
Nancy Drew.
Of course. What is your favorite color?
Purple.
Nice. Name one thing that can always be found in your purse.
Lipstick.
That is
Southern
Southern.
girl
We don't leave
has
home
to have.
without.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. My mama a couple of years ago fell and broke her ankle, and all day long I said, Mom, we gotta go to the hospital, I'm leaving. I was there for Mother's Day, and she's like, no, and finally I was laying out by their pool, and she comes out and she's in full makeup and she's dressed. She's like, hey, I'm ready to go to the hospital before you leave. And I'm like, all right, let's go. And she sat down and she goes, I'm not going with you looking like that. You need to go inside and put on you some lipstick and take your hair out of that knot. She made me get on my lipstick and fix my hair. And I said, Mom, we're going to the emergency room. We might see somebody. We didn't see nobody, but I always have my lipstick in my purse.
I know. My mom's the same way. She'll say, put some lipstick on. She's like, you need a little life in your face.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
she
You
describes it.
need a little something.
Yep. Okay. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
What was your first job?
I worked at a clerk at the local owned clothing shop called Doll Hairs in Lexington, Kentucky.
Doll hairs. Ooh,
Doll Hairs. It's DAW, but it sounds like I'm saying doll, but it's Doll Hairs.
doll hairs.
Yes.
What is the last TV show you binge watched?
Oh, this TV show I binged watch. You're gonna crack up. Cheers.
Love it. Love it.
Just recently we finished it. So now we're on to Frasier.
I am a huge Frasier fan, but on Cheers, are you a Rebecca or a Diane fan?
I'm a Rebecca fan.
Me too, but Carla
Yeah.
is my favorite.
Oh, Carla is definitely my favorite. She has the funniest one-liners. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot how funny that show really was. I mean, a lot of people today would be like, oh, you couldn't even air that show probably today. But I still, I'd watched it for the entertainment factor, not for any other reason.
I'm with you. Same thing
Yeah.
with Frasier. I
Yeah.
love Frasier. It's just my husband, he was like, oh, he's like, they're so pompous. Like, why do you
Yeah,
watch that?
I
I'm
love
like, because
it.
it's smart humor. I
It
love
is
it.
very smart humor. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, what is the best vacation you've ever been on?
Disney cruise.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Spoken
Best,
like a true
I mean, I
mom.
would go without my kids.
Yes.
It was so great. Yeah.
List one place that you've always wanted to visit in the South, but you haven't been there yet.
One place in the South that I've always wanted to go. Let's see. Trying to think. I've been to a lot of places in the South. What about Orange Beach? Isn't that in Alabama?
It is. By
There.
Gulf Shores. Yeah.
Yeah, there.
Nice.
I've heard, I'm not a big beach person, but I heard it's very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. What is the best career advice you ever received?
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Because I didn't take anybody's advice.
Then that might be it.
Yeah, I didn't. A lot of people told me I couldn't do things. And again, like a Southern, I'm gonna dig in, watch me.
You're Frank
just
Sinatra,
watch
you
me.
did it your way,
I
right?
did. I don't think I ever, when people would say I couldn't do something this way, or it was this way or that way. And I'm careful not to give advice to people
Mhm.
because, and I always say, well, this is what worked for me. And
Mhm.
again, like I said earlier, just ignorance,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I've never took anybody's advice
Well, there you go. It serves you well.
so far.
What is your favorite potluck dessert?
Oh, dessert is banana pudding.
Ooh, that's always a good one.
Banana pudding, homemade banana pudding,
With meringue or whipped cream?
whipped cream.
Mhm.
But although my mama makes the best meringue to go on top of hers, I do like the whipped cream.
Mhm. Do you do sandals or boots?
Boots.
Boots. And any advice that you would give to new writers?
Oh, advice. Again, here we go with advice. I always, people, again, write how you want to write. Because I was told that I could not write the way I told a story, and I have. And I think that when you write what's from your heart and you write, it comes out true and authentic. And it can always kind of be tweaked, but your voice comes out in that, and no one can duplicate your voice.
Mhm.
A lot of people say, oh, so-and-so killed their character the same way. And I'm like, yeah, but my voice is my voice. And, or, oh, what do you think if I was to write a camper series? Sure, go for it. I think it's great, but they'll never be the same because my voice is authentic to my voice. And I think when you write from your heart and the way it comes out is what becomes your voice.
Mhm.
And of course there's always editorial things that you might have to do, but write from your heart and let your voice come out. Don't try to make it somebody else you read or, things that you think should be.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
You can have the same events, but it's never the same stories,
Right.
So,
All the time.
yep. Well, tell our readers where they can find you.
I am everywhere. You can stalk me everywhere. You can go on my website at TonyaKappes.com and you can find links to like my Facebook author page, Instagram, and my Patreon. Definitely sign up for my newsletter. It is weekly, but they're not really kind of a newsletter. They're like a little chatty, something that's happened in my life that week, might be funny. And of course, my very sassy cat Rowena has her own op-ed in there every week. That's very popular. So you just never know. One time, just recently, I went to Austin, Texas, and my husband, Eddie, every morning I do a coffee greeting from the sunrise of our home.
Mhm.
And I wasn't there to do it. So my readers knew I wasn't going to be there. And I was on vacation, or not on vacation. I was also away during I called it a vacation. It was like a little writer's retreat.
Mhm.
And so, I wasn't going to do my newsletter. It was just going to be just a plain newsletter. And so lo and behold, little did I realize, one of my readers had messaged me, said, "Oh my goodness, I loved Eddie's coffee post." And I'm like, "What?" And so he had gotten on social media and he acted as if he was here and he did it and did the coffee post. And he said, "Yep, the first one was, yep, it's true." And he's showing the sunrise with the coffee steam. And he goes, "The sun still rises with Tonya, even though Tanya's gone." And I was like, "Oh," and then he put out the newsletter and he said, "If you have any questions, what I do for Tonya, email us back." And I probably got over 1,500 questions. And I'm like, "Oh."
That is incredible.
And so the newsletter is super popular. So even if you just want to get on the newsletter, but I'm everywhere, in YouTube. I've got a lot of free audiobooks on YouTube.
Mhm.
So you can find me there.
Perfect. Perfect. I'm sure that everyone's going to be so excited to learn more about your books and your story. I'm excited to share it with
Thank
our
you.
readers.
I'm excited too. Yeah. And then again,